Who remembers what our 7 periods of Jewish history are?
I remember.
You have them up here on the board. I see they're still there. So what are they? What do we have?
Foundation.
Foundations, good. Now during that foundational period, is there any place for the Kotel Maravi or Jerusalem? The period of the foundations?
They said it's the place of the Akedah, is it?
Good, good. Before that,
Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve.
that's right. There is a tradition that right under the Temple Mount there is a rock. It's called that golden dome.
Mm.
People call it the Dome of the Rock. Why? What's special about this rock? It's called Even Hashtiyah. It's the foundational rock.
Mm.
Judaism tells us that that's where the world was created from. This is the first point of matter in the world was in this mountain. Foundational stone. It was also the foundation for the Beit HaMikdash. So, but before that, so we have in the foundational period, what do we have? Avraham and Yitzchak. There's a tradition. So there's the creation story. There's Avraham and Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac.
Mm.
Avraham was told to go to Mount Moriah. Tradition is it's the same mountain. And that's where the almost sacrifice of Yitzchak took place. And then later on, fast forward, Jews go down to Egypt, come out of Egypt, conquer the land. A few hundred years later, King David says we can't just keep the Mishkan going in Shiloh and all the different places. We got to bring the Aron Kodesh to Yerushalayim. He buys the field, the Goren, the threshing floor of a fellow who was a Jebusite, Arneva Hayivusi, and he decides that's going to be the place for the Beit HaMikdash. According to what we just said now, there was historical precedent, but so there's the Beit HaMikdash. Again, that's also, that's already in the beginning of the second period, right? What's the second period called? First temple. The first temple period. We're starting about minus 1,000, so of course that's where the first temple stood. And then the second period is second temple. That was also in the same place. The end of that second temple period, King Herod expanded the mountain artificially. You can see how he did that today. See all the arches supporting. The original mountain was something like this, and he said that's just not enough space up here. So he put arches on top of arches, on top of arches. You can see the structure if you do, and he expanded. Basically, now it's a flat area, 500 by 500 by 1,000. 500 by 1,000. Much bigger than it used to be. And now, of course, on top of that, he built the Beit HaMikdash, the new and improved version of the second temple. And that was unfortunately destroyed in year 70, which brings us to the third period that's called the Sages. Chazal, the period of the Sages. And of course, we have, they lived through the destruction. The destruction was the year 0. After the period of the Sages, we have the Jews were pretty much exiled and no longer in the land of Israel. And there are a few descriptions about how our various leaders tried to make the pilgrimage to the land of Israel. And they came, the Rambam says he went up to the Temple Mount and prayed there. And throughout the ages, of course, now we get to 1967. Hey, what's going on? Good to see you. You didn't want to go there?
Yes.
Well, we didn't speak to Michal, but come here for today, and then we'll.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, anyway, so let's take a look at this book. This book, a whole book about the Western Wall. I gave you a brief history now, but there's pictures. That's what's good. There's pictures. Okay, this is, of course, you all know the plaza. This was made so large only after the 67 war, when we could clear away. There was houses that were blocking the entire plaza. But we started up much earlier, and this is the larger area of this is, of course, the dome, the golden rock, the golden dome of the rock, as I was telling you before. We're not sure. You can see here the structure, 500 by 1,000, which was made by King Herod at the end of the Second Temple period. Okay, around the turn of the century, 2,000 years ago. These walls are still the ancient 2,000-year-old walls. They have a special mark. You can see it when you go to anywhere. Herod was a master builder. He was a tyrant, but he was he was sort of half Jewish. He was one of the Edomian converts. There's a group of converts, people that converted. Anyways, he was appointed to be the ruler of the land of Israel. Good morning, on behalf of the Romans, who had taken over the empire after the Greek period at the end of the Second Temple period. And you can notice all the rocks of the Kotel, right? You've been to the Kotel, right? There's many different stones. All of the stones in the wall, whatever size they are, you can see that there's a little bit of a border to them. So ever notice that?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a mark of Herod's work. This was the type of stone that it makes it prettier, and this is called Herodian stone. Until today, it's used. Well, you can see it. You can see it. Where else at the Kotel? You can see it. Where we still have Herodians building. Where else in the country?
Here in Jerusalem?
Not so much in Jerusalem. I think pretty much in the Kotel is the only place you can find it, in this retaining wall of the Herodian. This is the built-up section I was describing before. That it's much wider than the original mountain. The original mountain was maybe over here, just a tiny little thing. Expanded it all the way till the edge. And I'll show it to you. One more picture. Another picture I wanted to show you here. Herodian stones you can find. Here's an ancient map from 1844. Shows you the Temple Mount. It's known as the Temple Mount. With the what we call today the Old City of Jerusalem. Around it, you can see very well the topography with the valleys around it. Maybe we'll see what their names are. This is, of course, the major valley. There's a smaller one here, which ran through here, and this one over here. One second, we'll just go. Anyways, also in Marat HaMachpelah. It's also a Herodian structure. And let's see what else I can show you. There's so much to see in Jerusalem that we found remnants and reconstructions of what Jerusalem used to look like in the Temple times. Here we go. Second Temple era. This is what you can see now at the on the Western Wall, but towards the south, the southern end of the Western Wall, you can see that there's a beginning of an arch here, right? So according to the archaeologists, this is what it used to look like. In other words, there was this valley, and people would walk up these major stairs to get up to the Second Temple when they came on the pilgrimage. So that's why we have remnants of both of this bridge and these stairs. We can see them in the walls until today. And this area has been dug much deeper. Actually, this used to be an old marketplace road where people would buy their korbanot and buy whatever they needed for their access to the temple. And to this day, there's left over the stores, the ancient Roman style sort of booths that they had in front of the stores. And on top of that, they left some stones, these massive stones of the wall, which during the destruction were pushed down from the wall onto the road. And so we have a very vivid picture of the destruction. Let me show you what else. Let me show you what else I have here. Anyways, I would like to. It's a nice book. You have here a whole history of, and the importance of the Kotel and the Western Wall. Of course, this is all in preparation for our celebration on tomorrow evening. Actually, this is a nice book. It's called. You can see it here. I only have 3 copies. That's why I made some photocopies. It's called Seder Tefillah Yom Ha'atzmaut, Order of Prayer for Yom Ha'atzmaut. But it's not only about Yom Ha'atzmaut. Yom Ha'atzmaut, pretty much it has the Mariv prayer, it has the Shachrit prayer, like every day. But there are additions. There are additions which we add on festive days. Who can tell me one of the additions that we add on Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim?
Psalm of Liberty by David.
Excellent. One of the most famous psalms, which we like to say, the Sephardim say it every Shabbat, but also and every day of Pesach, Ashkenazim say it as well, is Tehillim Kuf Zayin, Tehillim 107. It describes how many people have to, the 4 types of people that have to give thanks to Hashem for being delivered, for being redeemed. There's 4 types of sort of life passages or serious travails which they go through. And what are the 4? Anybody remember what the 4 is? First of all, what's the bracha that you say when you go through a troubling time? There's a special bracha. When you get out of it safely, there's a bracha that you usually make. I'm going to put on the air conditioning. What do you say to that? It's a little bit hot today. Let's see if this works. And so the Talmud says that anybody who passes over the ocean, passes through the ocean, he has to make a bracha called Birkat HaGomel. Birkat HaGomel. Have you ever made that bracha? Yeah? Yeah, cool. Nowadays, people don't travel by boat so much. But the tradition is that if you fly overseas, when you land, you make this bracha. You make it in the presence of 10 men, so it's usually done in shul. Also flying over the seas and if you traverse a desert. Desert is a dangerous place, just like the sea is a dangerous place, and you could die. So the 4 are: if you pass over a desert, pass over the sea. If you were in jail, if you're in jail and you got out, jails used to be much worse, but even today they're dangerous places. And the 4th one is if you were sick. If you were sick, deathly ill, and you got better, so these are the 4 people that have to say thank you. And we make the bracha called Birkat HaGomel. And the original context is written, and perhaps this was the original meaning of the psalm, that it's describing not just an individual who might have gone to jail, an individual who might have gotten sick. It's actually described in national terms. And lo and behold, you take a wider view of the situation. The end of the chapter talks about building a city and a country. And perhaps the best understanding of Tehillim Kuf Zayin, chapter 107 of Tehillim, is that it's describing the Jewish people coming out of the Galut. We can also move the vent up if you're a little too cold.
Thank you.
The Jewish people coming out of the exile. They have to travel back to the land of Israel. They travel through the desert, through the sea. Of course, the nation was sick. The very fact that we were in exile, we weren't in a normal place. It's like jail. as the prophets described many times, that when Jews people were in Egypt, it was like we were in jail. We were slaves. We couldn't get out. And so this is a classic passage which was recited by most on Yom Ha'atzmaut and some also on Yom Yerushalayim. In any case, they have another additional passages. What's the other passage we add on Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim? Famous order of prayer. Hallel. Hallel. That's right. We say the Hallel. Thanking, praising Hashem. Whenever there's a Yom Tov, a happy, or whenever there's a miracle done, like on Chanukah, we say the Hallel to thank Hashem for the miracles done for us. So this book, this is an order of prayer for Yom Ha'atzmaut. As I said, it could be used on Yom Yerushalayim as well. And what they did nicely is that they have not only the orders of prayer with the additions necessary, they also at the back and at the front have a few pages of sources which describe, you can give these out, and whoever doesn't have, I have a few photocopies. Please take a look at page 152. Who needs a copy? Pass these down. They have a few pages of sources, source material. Pass them down. There's one page. Yeah. Source material that discuss the land of Israel. They discuss the miracles, and how we're supposed to approach the miracles. Yeah, if you want, you can take one to keep. These books come from the library, but so unfortunately we only have 3 copies now. I don't know where the rest went. In any case, let's take a look on page 152. We'll see some of the sources brought here. It's a collection, of course. Every collection, has some things that I would skip and some things that other things I would put in. But it's very useful, and it's all in English, which is very useful if you don't have the Hebrew. There are many, many books on this topic in Hebrew, but in English, it's few and far between. So it's a lovely collection to have. And it's at the back of this special Siddur for Yom Ha'atzmaut. Okay, let's start at the beginning on page 152, at the top of the page. Kedushat ha'aretz, the sanctity of the land. Hananel, will you read for us?
What is Israel is older than all the other country, where lies its sanctity. That only from there came the honor. Honor and the two and the first fruit before Jerusalem is holier than all other cities.
Interesting. So where does this come from Maimonides, as you can see, where he describes that, let's say here's Jerusalem, okay? And you have inside Jerusalem, the X marks the spot, that's the Holy of Holies. And then we have outside of that a larger circle, which is the land of Israel. And then, of course, you have the whole world. So, Eretz Yisrael, the whole land, is holier than the rest of the world. And within Eretz Yisrael, Jerusalem is holier than the rest of Eretz Yisrael. And within Jerusalem, the Temple Mount is holier than the rest. So, where does this idea of holiness come from? What does holiness mean? The Rambam starts, Maimonides here, he starts with a very basic halachic definition. We learn this out from the laws of some of the sacrifices brought in the temple. For example, what is the Omer? So the Omer can only be brought from the land of Israel. Right? What's the Omer?
Fire sacrifice.
It's the?
Fire sacrifice.
Fire? No, not fire. Omer.
It's a mission.
It is a mincha. It is a mincha sacrifice made from what?
Flowers.
What flour from which grain? When is it brought? The Omer sacrifices. When did we start counting the Omer?
It's like
Barley. Pesach. First day of Pesach, second day of Pesach, is the day where we sacrifice the Omer. The day after the first day of Pesach is what date? 15. 16th, they would bring the Omer sacrifice. They would get cut down barley, From where? It had to come from the land of Israel. You can't take barley from outside the land of Israel. So we see that the entire land of Israel is connected to the temple. The temple is the core, the inner circle of this temple service. Yes.
I want to say, like, how we can determine if something is holy, like to say holy or holy.
Exactly. It's a good question.
So how?
How?
It's very easy.
Yes.
Why we say holy about Israel and about Jerusalem, and
Yes.
about the temple,
Yes.
and the temple itself?
Yes.
That's because we have much more of visible God's glory than anywhere else. It's like what is holy actually? It's visibility, a display of God's glory. That's what is holy.
Yeah, well, how do you see it though?
Well,
Do you see a vision? Do you see a cloud?
no.
No, you don't. So that's the problem. So what we have, what the Rambam suggests, is the way we can see the holiness is from what our sages describe to us, are the mitzvot. The mitzvot apply in one area of the world and not in any other area. The mitzvot which are associated with, what's the temple called in Hebrew? Beit Mikdash, Kodesh, Kedusha, holiness. So the house of holiness, we see that it's connected to the land of Israel. And the land of Israel is holy from all other countries. Wherein lies its sanctity? How do we know that Israel is more holy than any other country? Nothing against I have nothing against Italy. It's a nice country. Even the Philippines, it's fine. But it's not holy. How do we know it's not holy? Well, the Rambam says, we see here that the sacrifices. The first one we mentioned is the Omer, can only be brought from barley, which was grown and harvested in the land of Israel. So we see that the land of Israel has sanctity. Sanctity because it's connected to the Beit Mikdash, Kodesh. So the Kedusha sort of emanates from the temple, from the Makom HaKodesh, Kodesh HaKodashim. It emanates out into the land of Israel. Number one, Omer. Number two, what's the other example? You skipped one.
2 loaves.
What's the 2 loaves?
One.
Nope. Nope. I'm really upset now. Not at Shlomo. Shlomo, right? Shmuel. Not at Shmuel. Shmuel's the only one that I'm not upset at. Because he wasn't here yesterday. But all the rest of you who were here yesterday should know what the 2 loaves are.
And they were put in the first.
No.
The loaves of what?
2 loaves of what? Exactly. That's my question to you. You should know this. We only talked about it yesterday at length.
Bread.
2 loaves of bread.
2 loaves of bread. Yeah, what's 2 loaves of bread?
What's the question again?
What are the 2 loaves? The Rambam, if you look at the top of page 152, you have it in front of you, both on the page and in the book. It says that Israel is more holy than the rest of the countries because you can only bring the Omer from the land of Israel. You can only bring the 2 loaves from the land of Israel. What are these 2 loaves? Who can tell me anything about them?
Where are these 2 loaves?
Where are they? What they are? What they're made of? When they're brought? What's going on here? What are the 2 loaves? You all should know from yesterday.
When God gave us.
No.
It's the bread. It's from the wheat.
Thank you. There's a special korban on Shavuot. We read about it yesterday. It's called Yom HaBikurim. Right? The festival of Shavuot is called the day of the first fruits. What first fruits? We said two ways. One, it's the beginning of the season of bringing your ripened first fruits. And it's the first korban brought from the new wheat. From the new crop of wheat. We make 2 loaves of bread and we bring them to the temple on Shavuot.
Is that mincha? Is that called mincha?
It's a mincha. It's a very special type of mincha. Mincha means an offering which is not from an animal or a bird. It's from flour. This was a special type of mincha which was turned into bread. Most of the mincha offerings were just flour with some oil poured on top. Maybe add some incense. But this was a special mincha that was turned into bread. Loaves of bread which were chametz. We talked about it yesterday. Now you remember? The 2 loaves. It's a concept for Shavuot. Only for Shavuot. Once a year only. We just talked about it. The Omer and the 2 loaves, they both come from the grain. The grain has to be harvested. The barley for the Omer and the wheat for the 2 loaves. Only from the land of Israel. The Rambam says, we see here that the land of Israel is holy. Got that? All right. Little frustration for me. What the third example? This hopefully you'll get. First fruits. What does that mean? No. No. Also, you're frustrating me again. What are the first fruits that have to be brought to Jerusalem? Bikurim. That's right. How does it work? You have a farm in Afula.
You have to tie a ribbon.
You see the first fruits ripening, you tie a ribbon, yes, and then what happens? Yeah, Micha?
The name is Chadash?
No. The first wheat, which was forbidden until the Omer sacrifice, was called Chadash. The first barley and wheat, everything that before the Omer sacrifice is called Chadash. Afterwards, it's Yashan and you're allowed to eat it. But back to the first fruits. The first fruits, you tie a ribbon on it, and then what do you do with it? You don't have to wait. And sometimes it only ripens after Shavuot. You see that the first fruit is turning into a fruit. You tie a ribbon on it. And then, do you have to pick it right away? What do? You leave it on there until you harvest all your fruits. Then what do you do with it?
Give it to the Kohen.
Yeah, you just come and bring it to the Kohen. What do you do? We described yesterday, there's a whole parade, a whole procession. You put it in a basket, and you pretty up the basket, and all the people of the town come together, and they parade through the streets, and the people of Jerusalem come out to greet the people that are bringing their first fruits. It was a big event, bringing your first fruits to Jerusalem. And then, of course, you do give it to the Kohen, and he puts it next to the altar, and then you recite a certain passage from the Torah, Parshat Ki Tavo, in the book of Dvarim, where it tells the history of the Jewish people, which you're familiar with from where? Where did we quote this from? Where did we quote this passage describing a short history of the Jewish people? Haggadah Shel Pesach, right? Vayatzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham. God took us out of Egypt with a strong arm, with an outstretched arm, and then He brought us into this land, and He gave us this lovely fruit. So the first 3 examples that the Rambam brings, you should have all known exactly what they are: the Omer, the 2 loaves, and the first fruits. We just discussed them yesterday. It's good to review. Hashem wanted us to review today. I know you've been practicing your months of the year. That you're going to get perfect, right? All the dates of the holidays. Biblical, rabbinic. Zat Hashem. In any case, let's go back to the Rambam. We call him Rambam usually. Rambam stands for Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. Maimon was his father's name. In English, he's called Maimonides because he was Maimon's son. Anyways, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, we like to call him the Rambam. I once went to a conversion court with a student of mine from China. And the rabbis were thinking of questions. What can we ask this fellow? He's been studying in yeshiva for a year or 2. So they decided, we're going to ask him a difficult question. Said, what book or books that did the Rambam write? Not an easy question. I don't think you have to know that to convert. But anyways, that's what they were asked. I was so proud of my student. And you know what he answered? He answered, he wrote the Rambam. Colloquially, we call his major work, the Mishnah Torah, we call it the Rambam. Pass me the Rambam. He got it right. Without knowing the real answer of any of the names of the book. Many times we just call the Rambam's code, his major work was called the Mishnah Torah or the Yad HaChazakah. And sometimes we just call it the Rambam. The book as well as the author. So that was a funny exchange. Yes, please.
But the commentary of Rashi, is that so special name? Would you also say like it's called the Rashi?
Rashi on the Torah is called Rashi on the Torah.
There's not like
No, there's no name for it. He didn't write a book. He wrote a commentary. It's commentaries. Okay, so let's continue. Eretz Yisrael is holy than the countries. That only from there can the Omer and the two live in the first breath. Jerusalem is holier than all the other cities. So after the Rambam describes that the land of Israel is holy, then he says, and within the land of Israel, even Jerusalem is holier. What's holy about Jerusalem? He goes on to say also that there are certain sacrifices that are brought in the temple that can only be eaten in Jerusalem, up until the outskirts of the city walls. You cannot take the korban outside, like the korban Pesach, everybody knows. You have to go up to Jerusalem, eat it in Jerusalem. You can't take it outside of Jerusalem city walls. And then, of course, holier than that is the Temple Mount itself. There are some sacrifices which must be eaten on the mount. You're not allowed to take them out. So we see here that the Rambam has this concentric circles idea, that we learn that the sanctity of these various levels of sanctity, from their proximity, closeness, association with the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, the Beit HaMikdash. Because that's a halachic way to tell what is holy and what's. It's a very, very interesting concept. I said before, now that everybody's here, I can really give you a wider idea, because I don't want you to forget this ever. Such a beautiful idea. How can you say that sticks and stones and earth and dirt is holy? The word holy means, right, Rudolf Otto, German philosopher, has a book called Das Heilige, the Holy, where he tries to define, what does it mean, holy? And he says, essentially, that we use the word holy for anything associated with God, who is the Holy One, blessed be He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so, one second, I'll take your question in a second. So, how can earth and a wall, how can a wall be holy? How can a place, how can a land be holy? It's not God. We're not pantheists. So I heard this explanation once from Rav Hadari, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva HaKotel. And he said, if you follow our Kabbalists' explanation of how the world was created, at first there was God alone. He is eternal. We'll talk about theology another day, but the philosophy of Judaism seems to be very clear that God always is, was, and will be. So God is eternal. The new event, the innovative event, was when He decided to create the world. He decided to create the world is something physical. How could God's not physical, God's spiritual, or something it's hard for us to define. But He's clearly not sticks and stones. So the Kabbalah describes a process of you could call it, what's that when you have electricity of a different current, that you've got to bring it to the currency, electrical currency that's in Israel. What's that called? You need a box that does something, it's called a transformer. It's a transformer, right? It changes the 120 volts into 220 volts, right? You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes they have them automatically now inside machines. They can be used in both countries where they have different types of electricity. There's something called the transformer. So basically, God devised a system of transformations, where He could he sort of transformed his divine essence through 10 stages, 10 different step-down transformations, till finally the lowest level, right? The highest level was only spirituality. The middle level had some form of physicality. And then the next level had even more closeness to what we would say the material world. So finally, the lowest of the worlds, the lowest of these step-down transformations of the transformer is sticks and stones. It's the material world that we see today. So essentially, the material world that we see today ultimately has to come from God, has to come from something spiritual. So it's a derivative of a derivative of a derivative of this type of process of God sort of transforming part of his reality into a material reality. And then, from that first point of material, of course, then the material world can develop, maybe through a process of evolution. It's not a bad word, necessarily. And the world develops different types. We have how many elements today?
4 elements? I don't know.
You're living in the Middle Ages, 4 elements. Today we have
100 plus.
100 plus. When I was in high school, it was 81 elements. Then it was 92, then 103, 104. Periodic table, the table of elements. Right, that's the way the ancients used to think. That's all there was, is 4 elements. But we know, now we divide it a little differently. In any case, the world has so many different elements to it. Of course, earth, wind, and fire, and water. In any case, so that developed from once you have the physical world. But that first point, what did we say at the beginning of class? Whoever was late missed it. What is the first point of material in this world? Where is this world expanded from? Yeah, you weren't in the class, but you do know it. Excellent. We talked about the Even Shtia, the rock, because it showed you the dome of the rock. There's a rock underneath the Temple Mount, which is called the Even Hashtia, the foundation rock. Right, this is considered, according to our tradition, to be the point of foundation, from where the rest of the world expanded. And so Rav Hadari says as follows. He says, how can you have a rock which is holy? It's just a rock. It's just atoms and molecules and combination of elements. It's physical. How can it be holy? So according to the Rambam, we described, well, it's used for this temple. The temple is the holy service of God. But this is a different explanation. He says, really, when Judaism speaks about a holy place, right? We talked about that the Beit HaMikdash is holy, that the land of Israel is holy. How can you have a land which is holy? So he says, if you take this idea that we just described now, how the process of how God created the world from nothingness, from his very existence, with this step-down process, and we say that the first point was the Temple Mount, the dome of the rock, the foundation rock. So, and we're going to say that rock is holy. That place is holy. Why is it holy? It's not because the material is holy, because essentially that point is the access point between the material world and the spiritual worlds. Right? That's when the upper spirituality, the essence of God, got transformed into the lowest level of the material world. It's at that point. So essentially we speak about something, the material being holy. It's not that the material itself is holy. It's holy because of where it came from. It's holy because its association with the world of God's essence, which is non-physical. And that's a beautiful explanation for, even though, of course, we do have holy places in Judaism, it's not that we turn the holiness into God itself, but perhaps it's a place marker, perhaps it's a transition point, perhaps it's a reminder for us of the spiritual elements of the world, because the essence of this holy space is that it's associated with God, who is the creator of this world. In any case, the Rambam describes in Jerusalem, in Judaism, is the Temple Mount, the Holy of Holies within the Temple Mount. But from there, all of Jerusalem is holy because it's associated with the temple. From there, all of Eretz Yisrael is holy because there's some korbanot. Give me 3 examples. Which korbanot can only be brought from the land of Israel? Which one? The Omer. 2 loaves. And the Bikurim. Finally, someone's listening. Right? That's what he says. These korbanot can only be brought from the land of Israel. You can bring a cow or a sheep or a goat from Babylon. You can bring it from Canada if you want. But you can't bring the Omer or the 2 loaves or the first fruits. You can't bring your first fruits from Omaha, even though you might have lots and lots of apples there or whatever you grow. You can grow lots of wheat in the Ukraine. You can bring it over, export it to around the world. Right? Ukraine is the mother of wheat, of the breadbasket of Europe, right? So much wheat. It's not kosher for the 2 loaves. It has to be brought only from the land of Israel. So this shows you the sanctity of the land of Israel. Now, what's amazing is, what about today? Today we don't have a temple. We don't have sacrifices. We don't have the 2 loaves. We don't have the first fruits. And we don't have the Omer sacrifice. We count the Omer. But we don't have any Omer. So maybe there's no more sanctity. Maybe the land of Israel is not holy anymore. There's no sacrifices.
Why?
Because we don't have a temple. If it's only holy because we bring the sacrifices from the land, you would think, maybe it's over. Game over. That's the second paragraph. I'll take your question in just a minute. The second paragraph, Maimonides says, sanctity has never departed. You have it on the page 152, second paragraph? Sanctity has never departed from Jerusalem and the temple. It says the sanctity of Jerusalem and the temple is derived from the divine presence. And the divine presence never ceases to radiate. Behold, it is written. What do we call divine presence in Hebrew? Shekhinah. Behold, it is written, I shall make desolate your holy places. On which our sages commented, though they stand desolate, their holiness remains. They're still called holy places, even though they're desolate. So we see that the holiness remains in Jerusalem because the holiness of Jerusalem comes from the Shekhinah, from the divine presence. And that doesn't just move because of some building being broken down. The holiness remains in Jerusalem. And that's why until today I've never been on the Temple Mount. Because it's too holy. We'll get into the details of that maybe someday. But there's maybe certain parts of the Temple Mount that we're allowed to go up to. But there's certain restrictions, laws of holiness. And we talked about it the other day, purity, impurity. If you're impure, you can't go to the holiest places. The holiness remains, even though we don't have a temple. Okay, these are the first 2 passages from the Rambam that I wanted to share with you to try to understand what is this holiness of the land of Israel. What is the holiness of Jerusalem? Jerusalem is even more holy than the rest of the country because this holiness of Jerusalem derives not only from the mitzvot, from the korbanot, it derives from the divine presence. Okay, Gabriel, you wanted to ask a question, please.
No, I was to learn that it's like Hashem, and his name is Hamakom.
Yes.
That he's everywhere, so his divine presence everywhere. So we learn that everything needs, like God uses everything material in the world. So let's say this cup would be useless if there was no water, and like everything is like needs something else. So it's what you said, like everything derived from like the rocks and from everything.
Yeah, it is. The truth is, what you're describing now, is an extension in many streams of Judaism, very popular today. The Hasidic stream of Judaism, the Kabbalistic worldview, is different versions, of course. But if you take what I said to its logical extreme, essentially everything is holy. So everything has godliness in it. God created the world. It wouldn't exist without God creating it. So there's godliness not only in Jerusalem, and not only in the temple, not only in the land of Israel, but everything is holy. Even the rocks and stones. As long as I use it for the service of God, it's associated with holiness. Or even if I don't use it for the service of God, God created it. So there's God. Right? We talked about how many elements are there in the material world. Well, there's one more element which cannot be measured. It's called the God particle. They found it in CERN, in Geneva, a number of years ago. I'm just joking. They called something the God particle. There was some meson or something that they were looking for, and they didn't have any experimental evidence of it for many, many years. And a couple of years ago, they found it. They called it the God particle. But it's
actually the God particle.
No, it's not really a particle of God. No. It's just it was an amazing discovery. But anyways, yes. According to the Kabbalistic thought, there's godliness everywhere. Otherwise, it would cease to exist. God creates life, and so but this is a little bit of a dangerous concept, right? Because if you say that there's godliness in the tree, we might as well bow down to the tree, right? Avodah zarah, idol worship, it rests on this concept that God is in all the physical world too, and you get two, pagan services and stuff like that, where people don't know that. What you have to refine that understanding with is that there might be a difference between levels of holiness. Sure, there's godliness in a stick and a stone, but the holiness of Jerusalem is different, etc., etc.
Yeah, you can actually feel it around.
And you feel it. That's beautiful, amazing, great. Okay, other questions? Yeah, Micha.
To add one thing, it's like the Ram concept. He was telling like yes, the whole earth is filled with Hashem's presence.
Mm-hmm.
So Hashem is everywhere, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But you have certain degrees of holiness, closeness that you can experience. Like certain days, certain places, like that you have there more higher degree of closeness to God than in the toilet.
Yeah.
But Hashem is everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There's another story I have from the Beitin. Somebody asked, where is God? And they didn't really understand. I was sort of translating, but they didn't know. So the rabbi asked, is God in Antarctica? And this fellow was from a country where he didn't know his geography very well. He didn't know what Antarctica was. So it was a real, conversation of, two people deaf. So it was a culture clash. In any case, what did he want the answer? Where is God? Where is God? Everywhere, right? Hashem is everywhere. That's what he wanted him to hear, that he understood that God is everywhere. What does it mean God is everywhere? If God's everywhere, then everywhere is holy. It's true, on some level. It's not the same thing as, perhaps there's various levels of holiness, various levels of closeness, but the concept that God is everywhere, right? This is the children's song that I was taught. Hashem is here. Hashem is there. Hashem is truly everywhere. Okay, want to learn it with me? It goes with hand signs. Hashem is here. Hashem is there. Hashem is truly everywhere. Up, up, down, down, right, left, and all around. Here, there, and everywhere. That's where He can be found. Up, up, down, down, right, left, and all around. Here, there, and everywhere. That's where He can be found. Hashem is here, Hashem is there. Hashem is truly everywhere. Hashem is here, Hashem is there. Hashem is truly everywhere. Up, up, down, down, right, left, all around. Here, there, and everywhere. That's where He can be found. Up, down, down, right, left, and all around. Here, there, and everywhere. That's where it can be found. You won't forget this one. Maybe you'll forget what the two loaves are, but you won't forget where is Hashem. Okay? Yeah.
There was a story about
I like stories.
Yaakov and Yosef and all the other sons of him, and why he loved Yosef more than all the other sons.
Yeah.
He gave them a test. He said like, okay, I'm giving you a bird to each of you.
A what?
A bird, a creature, a bird.
Okay.
So you go on and kill this bird so the Hashem will not see it. And they all tried like different ways to hide from Hashem, how they kill this bird.
Yeah.
But Yosef, he did not kill the bird. He brought it back to his father and he said, Father, I cannot find the place where Hashem will not see it.
Ah, nice story, yeah. That's a smart kid. They say that in communist Russia, there was a teacher who was trying to indoctrinate the students. And he was teaching them that all there is what the material world, materialism, right? It's a big part of the communist world with Marx, right? And his materialism. So he said, there's no God. Can you see God? No God. So one of the students in the back row was a little chutzpah, and he said, can you see the teacher's brain? So,
do you believe the teacher has a brain?
Right, something like that, yeah. So, the materialism is not so convincing.
You cannot see the brain itself, but you can see the result of the brain working, right?
So you can see the result of Hashem, how He acts in the world, even if you can't see Him Himself. It's not physical; you can see it with your eyes, but maybe we have other access points. Maybe you can see Him with your soul. I don't know. Okay, very good. So the holiness of the land of Israel is expressed in a mitzvah as well. And that is the other source. That's not necessarily what I want to talk about now. I want to maybe perhaps move ahead and let's see what other sources I have for you. Okay, we can continue. Mitzvah Yishuv Haaretz. There's a mitzvah to settle the land. Everybody have it? Page 152. This is a famous passage from Nachmanides, not Maimonides. What was his name?
Moshe ben Nachman.
That's right, not Moshe ben Maimon, but Moshe ben Nachman. And so he's called Nachmanides instead of Maimonides. Nachman's son. Nachmanides. He lived a little bit after the Rambam. He overlapped for a few years, but he was a young child when the Rambam died. In the 13th century, in Spain, the Rambam was from Spain. He had to run away. His father was persecuted, and they went through the land of Israel, eventually ended up in Alexandria and in Egypt as the doctor of the Sultan. The Rambam had to double, other than being the chief rabbi and writing the greatest halachic work of all time, he also worked as a doctor. He was a very, very special man. In any case, to this day in Spain, there is, I think in Gerona, as it's called, there's they put up a statue of Maimonides. The non-Jewish township. They knew that he's such a special intellect and leader of the Jewish people. Maybe they also wanted to get some Jewish tourists to come to visit the birthplace of Maimonides. But in any case, he was from Spain originally. And Nachmanides lived in Spain as well. He had to run away after the famous disputation he was made to fight in a public disputation against, I think his name was Pablo, a Jew who converted to Christianity, and the Christian church was very powerful in the kingdom. But the king, despite much opposition, he promised Nachmanides that he would allow him freedom of speech to defend himself. There's a movie I saw, and dramatization of, it's called The Disputation, I believe.
So black and white.
Black and white, yeah. Anyways, at the end of it, he won. It was clear that then both accounts from both sides describe how Nachmanides disproved all the Christian claims, but they didn't kill him. The king was true to his word, but he couldn't. He was not so powerful, and he had to exile him. So Nachmanides had to leave Spain, and he actually made a trip to Israel, and we have his many of his comments, his writings. After he came to Israel, he describes how he sees the geography is different. He wrote a famous commentary on the Torah, like Rashi's commentary on the Torah. We have Nachmanides' commentary on the Torah, but he also wrote many, many works. He was a great Talmudist and a great scholar. Really, one of the also famous for being perhaps the first person to share some of the Kabbalistic traditions, which he received from his teachers, which were not really written so much before his time. So the 13th century in Spain, this was the beginning of it's known as the Tor HaZahav, the golden era, the golden age in medieval Spain. Before, of course, it ended. When did it end abruptly? 1492, exactly, for the expulsion of all the Jews from Spain. They had enough, and they kicked them all out. So it wasn't quite as golden as, but in the day, there was a lot of Jewish scholarship in Spain. Maimonides lived there for his childhood, and then he had to move on. But Nachmanides lived there. He also was pushed on. But the many, many other Jewish scholars was the center of Jewish learning for a good few hundred years. In any case, Nachmanides has one comment here, and I just want to give you an explanation where it comes from. There are many, many books of the Torah where we have the wisdom of Judaism stored, treasuries of Torah. Who can name me one book of where we have Torah wisdom? The Talmud, good. What else? Mishnah, it's part of the Talmud. Mishnah is part of the Talmud, very good. Shulchan Aruch, a little bit later. In the Siddur, there's Jewish wisdom in the Siddur. What else? The Torah, the Chumash, yeah? The Tanakh, yeah? Ktuvim, right? That's right. We have Torah, Nevi'im, Ktuvim, 3 parts of the Bible. What else? Nevi'im, another part of the Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ktuvim. So there's many, many books. And then there's, we can divide them up into a few genres. You know what a genre is? It's a French word, I believe. Genres. It's a type of literature. Genre. What's that? Yeah, what's that? It's a type. What's that in Chinese? We need a translation here. You have folk, you have rock, you have classical music. It's a different type. Varieties is just like a group of type of literature. Yeah? How do you say genre in Chinese? So I'll spell it. Use Google Translate. You understand what I'm saying? Of course, you know, Hananel understands. He's a musician, right? So you understand different types of music, right?
What instrument you play?
Yeah, I don't play.
He sings. He sings.
Well,
He sings. So let's put it from English to Chinese. This? Here?
check it out.
Steven, this what you were? Same thing?
Yes.
Same thing, yeah.
It's like a standard for the login.
你明白嗎？
Login.
我知道呢個講乜，但係
He doesn't know how to explain.
Let me see if we have here.
He understands, but he don't know how to explain.
Anyways, a style, like a style. Yeah. Right, exactly. So we have different types of books in Judaism as well. Some books are mainly historical, telling us the stories. Right, Joshua, the Shoftim, the kings. It's a narrative. It's a category, a type of literature, that's right. And then there's books of halacha. Like you mentioned the Shulchan Aruch. We just read from the Rambam's code, it says. It's a code of law. His major work was what was it called? His major work? The Rambam. Well said. And then there's another category of type of literature, and that is much less studied, much less central, but it is still a fascinating type of literature, and that is, there's a tradition in the Talmud that there are 613 mitzvot. There's a list. So you have to come up with a list. The Talmud doesn't have a list. So the Rishonim, and even the end of the Geonim, they started to say, well, if there's supposed to be 613, so let's list them. Before that, nobody ever had a list. Not in the period of the Tanakh, there's not a list of 613. There's mitzvot intermixed with the stories, and there's many groups of mitzvot, but there's no list. Which are the 613? So we don't have it in the Tanakh. We don't have it in the Mishnah. We don't have it in the Talmud. Don't have it in the Tanakh. Don't have it in the period of the sages, in the Talmud. There's no list. The first people that started thinking, well, maybe if there is a tradition of 613, maybe we should make a list. Were the Geonim. And then further on in the Rishonim period, there was the early, the time of the Rambam and the Ramban. They really, the Rambam, other than his major work called the Mishnah Torah, he wrote a book called the 613 Mitzvot. And he decided to make a list. Rambam. Maimonides. And it was a very nice, as I said, before him, there was other counts. But the Rambam made his own, he critiqued theirs, and he said, my list is better. Not the first, but he made a famous one. He was a famous, everything he did was famous. There was actually people who did it before him, but he critiqued their lists, and he came up with his list. It's called Sefer Mitzvot. We have it. We have it actually right here. It's at the beginning of the beginning of his book of his major magnum opus, the Mishnah Torah. He gave his list because then he said, "Well, I want to make a halacha book of all of the laws of the Torah. Got to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'll make a list first, and then I'll make sure that I plug it in. I make sure that all 613. I talk about all the details of all 613. Very logical, very structured thinker. So he made a list, and it's a wonderful book. Sefer HaMitzvot, the book of the commandments. And then along came Nachmanides, and he of course studied all the Rambam's works, and he studied as a great Talmudist himself. And he said, "Wait, I disagree here, and I disagree there. I think that there are some mitzvot which the Rambam should not have put in. For example, you could make the distinction, the Rambam was very clear, we should never put into that list of 613 rabbinic mitzvot. Give me an example of a rabbinic mitzvah. Give me an example of a rabbinic holiday. You should know that. Chanukah and Purim. That's not part of the 613, because they're rabbinically added. Only the biblical mitzvot. So the Rambam said he didn't add in Chanukah, he didn't put it in Purim. That's fine. But the Nachmanides came and said, Rambam, you added this one. I think that's not a biblical mitzvah, and you left out some. There's other mitzvot which you didn't get into your list of 613. So we have a debate between the Rambam and the Ramban. Maimonides and Nachmanides. Got that? So this passage on page 153 at the bottom is from mitzvah number 4 of the mitzvot, which the Nachmanides claims that the Rambam left out. The Rambam forgot these mitzvot. I think he's a list of close to, I can't remember the exact number now. Is it 25 or 30? I don't remember exactly, but there is a list of mitzvot which the Nachmanides, the Ramban, adds to the 613. And of course, if you're going to add mitzvot, what do you have to do? You have to take some out. Because you got to stick with the number 613. This is the tradition. It says in the Talmud that there's precisely 613. So it became a little bit of a sport. I call it a sport. It's a genre of literature where, how do you count exactly the 613? This one's included, that one has to be taken out. Why is it included? Well, you could always group a few mitzvot together, right? So for example, you're supposed to build the Beit HaMikdash. So you could count, well, you're supposed to build in the Beit HaMikdash, there's a candelabra, and there's an Aron Kodesh, a holy ark, and then there's a table, and then there's vessels. You can count that as 4 mitzvot, or you could just say build the Beit HaMikdash, that's only 1 mitzvah. So how you count can be argued about. It's debated because there was no list. There's no exact, we don't have a tradition exactly which ones are the 613. Anyway, so this is another type of literature. Bottom line is, the Rishonim, we're talking about the Rishonim here, and they're defining for us the various mitzvot of the Torah, based on the Talmud, based on all the literature beforehand. And the first one that really describes the mitzvah to settle in the land of Israel, to settle the land of Israel, is Nachmanides, and it's here on page 152. If you just quickly, before we read page 152, look at the top of page 153. Second paragraph comes from Maimonides' code. All are enjoined to settle in Eretz Yisrael, even if it means leaving a comfortable home for an inferior one. So it's not like the Rambam disagrees that you should live in Israel. It's a question, it's a debate how to count. Does he count that as a separate mitzvah or not? It's a little bit of an esoteric discussion, but the point of the description of what it means that you must settle the land of Israel, it's most succinctly and most clearly defined by Nachmanides here.
Did they resolve the dispute?
Nope.
Till today?
Till today.
Nah.
Yeah. Yeah. 800 years.
So it's still a tradition under
debate.
Okay.
Some people say it's a mitzvah. One of the 613, you must make aliyah. Other rabbis say, maybe we see the Rambam didn't put it in the list. You're not obligated to. Maybe it was obligated at one period in history, not nowadays. There's lots of debates. Judaism is full of scholarship and debates, even about basic principles. But the majority of rabbis understand that it is a mitzvah. If, for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, it was impractical. You couldn't live in this country. This country was unhabitable. Malaria, there was no infrastructure, there was no water, there was no, it was, for years it was under the Mamelukes, and for many years the Jews were not allowed to come into the land of Israel. We know that, even in this century. But once it became practical, then, according to many, many rabbis, the mitzvah kicks in. Now all you have to do is buy a plane ticket. Hop on a plane. Okay, the hardest part might be is you need a visa. But if you're Jewish, you can get a visa pretty easily, right? But good morning. Please have a seat. Benjamin.
Sorry,
Yeah.
there's something like if you leave the Eretz Israel, it's like you're committed to idolatry, right? Why is it saying so?
We're going to get to it in a minute. First, I want to read the Ramban, and we'll read the Rambam afterwards. We'll discuss it. It's a good question. Yeah.
I find funny What's ironic that like the Rambam he teaches in the same server not to dwell in Mitzrayim based on mitzvah, right? But he himself.
And he lived in Egypt. That's a very good question. It's hilarious. It's really funny. He writes very clearly, you're not allowed to live in Egypt. And there he is, living in Egypt. Another page? Yeah, sure. Please. We're not allowed to live in Egypt. So how do we explain that? Well, that teaches you very important principle. Michael Aryeh and everybody, pay attention. Very important principle. There is a description of a type of study. It's called fundamentalism. It means you read a text, an ancient text, and you just read it, a surface reading. You take the plain meaning of the words, and then you try to apply it today. It says it black on white. That's called fundamentalist reading. It's like the most basic, like fundamentals is basic, right? It's the basic meaning of the text. In Judaism, like in most advanced scholarship, there's an understanding that many times you have to read between the lines. Many times you can't just apply a text written 800 years ago or 1,500 years ago to the current situation. And so you have a text which states the basic principle, but then you need guidance how to apply it to the real world. And so that's a great example. The Rambam himself writes, based on what it says in the Talmud, one should never live in Egypt. But you see that he himself is living in Egypt. So it must be that there was some explanation. There must be that there was some medium between the basic law, which stands true, he wouldn't have written it if he didn't think it was true, and how to apply that law practically. There may be other considerations. Maybe he was forced to because he was running away from the law. He was going to be killed if maybe he needed to be there to help the other Jews there. Maybe what he meant was that if you're going to be influenced by the nations, then you're not allowed to be in the other countries. But if you have a community and you're with a Jewish community, you can be in a non-Jewish city. It sort of answers your question also. You read ahead a little bit, that maybe how can you be in a city with bad influences when you have pagans? You're not allowed to live in such a city. So we have to not be fundamentalists. We have to read with the words of the Rambam, and then it's mediated through our oral tradition, how that gets applied to the real world today. So you can't just read a text that's written 2,000 years, hey, we're not doing this. It's a good question. You should be saying that, but then you have to wait for the answers. You have to search for the answers. Not just wait, but search. And this has been discussed for thousands of years. And you think you're the first one to notice that question? The Rambam was written 800 years. Everybody who read the Rambam said, wait a minute. They scratched their head. He's sitting there in Egypt saying you're not allowed to live in Egypt. What, does he not believe in what he himself is writing? So everybody asked that question. So everybody gave different answers. I gave you a few now. Gave you a few suggestions. But this is a good example. When we read these ancient texts, we have to be very careful that we apply it mediated through our oral tradition, through our tradition of our rabbis, and how it's interpreted, how it gets applied. There's different conditions, there's different situations, and so that's a good example. But anyways, let's get back to Nachmanides, okay? Someone else had a question, though? Somebody wanted to speak, or it's okay? So let's go back. Mitzvah Yeshuv Eretz Yisrael. Stephen, please read for us.
The settlement founded until now, with the help of God, will provide strength and...
No, where are you reading?
Yisuf.
152, you have that?
Yeah.
We have been commanded.
We have been commanded in the Torah to occupy the land which the Lord granted to our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and not to live in under foreign yoke or allow it to become desolate. The exact boundaries of the territories covered by this religious obligation are specially delineated for us in the Torah. Do not be misled into imagining that this obligation only applies to dispossessing the Canaanite. This is not the case, but we are commanded in every generation not to leave it in the hand of any nation. The conquest of the Holy Land is thus an obligation devolving on us in all generations. The hyperbolic statement of our sages regarding the primary duty of residing in the Holy Land proceeded from their concern to carry out this explicit command of the Torah. You shall dispossess them and dwell in their land.
Okay, so if you look at the Hebrew, it says mitzvat yishuv haaretz. Yishuv haaretz means settling land. Settling can mean two things. And in the Ramban, we call him the Ramban, Nachmanides is very clear here to point out that both meanings are true. To settle could mean to live. Means you build a house, plow the land, make some food. Settle can mean to live in the land. So you must live in the land of Israel. So if you're living in New York, you get on a plane, and you come to live in the land of Israel, and you're fulfilling a mitzvah, the mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. But also he says, there's a second meaning of the word to settle. And that is, as he says, not to leave it on the third line, not to leave it under foreign yoke or allow it to become desolate. So there's two elements here. One is allow it to become desolate, so it has to have houses in it, you have to have people in it, so people have to come. But wait, there's an element of sovereignty. Don't leave it under foreign yoke. We're supposed to conquer the land. We're supposed to make it a Jewish country. We're supposed to have a Jewish government. That's another meaning of to settle the land. To settle, not only dwell in it, but to conquer it. To conquer it and put it under Jewish sovereignty. This is the way the Ramban is very clear that Jews throughout the centuries, some very pious Jews always wanted to come to live in the land of Israel, even though it was very hard. There was no infrastructure. You couldn't make a living. There was just nothing here, and it was. But some people tried anyways. They were able to fulfill part of this commandment to settle the land. They settled. They lived in the land of Israel with great dedication. However, only at the beginning of the last century, with the advent of nationalism in the European society, the Zionistic political movement was formed, which said, let's actually not just move as individuals, but let's create a state. We deserve to come back, just like we had the first Jewish Commonwealth in the First Temple era, and the Second Commonwealth in the Second Temple era when we came back from the exile. Let's come back from the exile again and have a third time a Jewish state. And this was called political Zionism. And according to this Ramban, and many rabbis knew this Ramban very well and quoted it, and they said, well, these political Zionists, they're doing a mitzvah. Not only is it a mitzvah to come and dwell in the land, but it's a mitzvah to not have foreign yoke over there, right? We've got to conquer the land from not only the Canaanites, that was the biblical nation that was living there in biblical times, but whoever's there now. Now it's the Ottoman Empire, then it was the British Mandate, whatever it is. It's our mitzvah that should be Jewish sovereignty over the land of Israel. And it's this mitzvah that the political Zionist movement is doing. It wants people, of course we want people to live there, to move there and settle there. We also want to create an independent Jewish country where the Jews should rule the land. That's the mitzvah according to the Ramban. And it was a little surprising and a little difficult. Not a little difficult, very difficult. Until today it's very difficult. Some rabbis, they could not swallow this. because the political Zionist leadership was not religious. They were not keeping Shabbat. They were not wearing a kippah. Some of them maybe even claimed to be atheists. Many of them said, I don't want to have anything to do with Judaism except for political Zionism. I want to make it, we deserve to have our own state. So most of the rabbis, I don't know most, there's a debate, how many is most, but many rabbis said, these guys, they're doing their own thing. They're not doing a mitzvah. They want to solve anti-Semitism. Or they want to, for whatever reason, they want to recreate, make a new Judaism. They call it Zionism. But that's not Judaism. Another rabbi said, of course they're wrong because they're disconnected from God and the Torah. But the act of creating a Jewish government in the land of Israel is a mitzvah. So whether you like it or not, they are trying to do a mitzvah, whether they like it or not. We should join them and do this mitzvah. Of course, we're going to fight them on should we keep Shabbat or not. Of course, we're going to try to give a Jewish education to our children. We're not giving up our beliefs and our mitzvot. But there's a new mitzvah that we couldn't do for thousands of years. And now with this advent of this turn of events of history and the way nationalism is being supported around the world, we can claim to have a Jewish country. We can finally do the mitzvah of the Ramban, that the Ramban defined for us. And so we should join the secular Zionists, even though we're going to stay true to our Torah values, unlike many of those Zionists. They maybe were trying to replace Judaism, whatever it is. But we're not. But we have to join them to do this mitzvah. And so they created a movement. Nowadays we call it religious Zionists. At the beginning, people thought this was a contradiction in terms. Zionism was almost, in the world, it was synonymous with a rejection of the rest of Judaism. But many rabbis, many Jewish communities felt that that's the wrong approach. It's not against Judaism, it's a mitzvah to do political movements so that we can have Jewish sovereignty in the land. And so therefore we're not going to give up on our religious values and our religious practice. But we are going to join the Zionist movement and do a mitzvah thereby. And to this day, there's groups of religious Zionists which are joining the Zionist party, and more religious people are entering the Knesset. And even though they have trouble swallowing this bone of the word Zionism, because it was associated so much with secularism, and even anti Jewish culture and Jewish beliefs. But if you want to do the mitzvot, as God told us, and this is the way it has to be done. It has to be done with the political moves and even a military move, right? To conquer. Conquest, according to the simplest reading, conquest means with guns. With guns and tanks and whatever we can to conquer. We have to fight. According to the Ramban, we have to fight to get rid of the Canaanites or the British or wherever it is, and so that we have Jewish control over the land of Israel. It's an obligation for all generations. And so we can't have our own army from Bnei Brak. So we have to join the secular Zionists, the Zionist movement, and not give up on what we believe, but we can join them to do this great mitzvah together. It's the greatest change in Jewish history for 2,000 years, is that we have a Jewish country. Obviously, we know the end of the story. It's not the end of the story, but we know that the end of that period of the foundation of Israel, here we are 75 years later, we have a Jewish country. And until today, unfortunately, not the leaders are not such Torah Jews. Although, last Prime Minister of Israel wore a kippah. But it's more complicated than that. And of course, we haven't reached the end. Not everybody is keeping mitzvot. But more and more, we see that the traditional Judaism is getting stronger in the land of Israel, and it could be we're in the right direction, although it's a long, slow process. But the fact is that we, the collective Jewish people, have done this mitzvah, at least partially. We don't have all of the land of Israel. We can debate, as he says, as the Ramban said, the exact boundaries of the territories covered by this religious obligation are delineated for us in the Torah. We could, maybe we haven't achieved all of the boundaries that we should, but definitely the fact that we did not leave it under foreign yoke. We're not allowing it to be desolate. So we're fulfilling the mitzvah of Yishuv Haaretz, of settling the land of Israel. Clear? Questions, comments? Yes, Benjamin.
I just want at this period of time was the example for the African countries that there they start basing the Zionism, not the religious Zionism, but was the ideology.
Right. The concept of nationalism, I mentioned, it was definitely in fashion. It was recognized, during the 1800s, and so Herzl rode that wave, and we were able to successfully create our national state. Nowadays, here we are 75 years later. The international movement is the opposite direction, right? We have the European Union. We have all different countries in Europe. Some want to keep their own identity. What did England just left, right? Brexit. But the majority of Europe, they want to band together. But it's complicated, right? There's always a balance between keeping your national identity and having the concept of international community and working together in the Euro. So it's interesting how there's political changes and movements in history, but it was very useful for creating the State of Israel. The fact that there was a nationalist atmosphere in the 1800s.
Weinberg, did Ramban and Ramban, did they disagree on conquering the land?
So that's unclear. It is a fact that Rambam did not list it as one of the 613. So that would seem to indicate that there's some difference. Why did he not? Maybe he disagreed. However, if you now look at the top of page 153, I started to read it to you before. This comes from the Maimonides. He has a long section in his book, in his code, talking about the importance of Eretz Yisrael. All are enjoined to settle in Eretz Yisrael, even if it means leaving a comfortable home. At all time, one should reside in Eretz Yisrael, even in a city inhabited mostly by heathens, and one should not reside outside of Israel, even in a city inhabited mostly by Jews. For to leave Eretz Yisrael is tantamount to committing idolatry. So that's a pretty bad sin, idolatry. So the fact that we're supposed to settle the land is definitely mentioned by the Rambam, but you can already see here the language is a little different. He doesn't speak about conquest explicitly. He doesn't speak about leaving it under foreign yoke. So the language is a little different, and so the emphasis is a little bit different. It's a long discussion. There's a debate until today. Did the Rambam agree with the Ramban, or did he disagree? In what ways? What are the parameters of the mitzvah according to each? And it's an open question. Yeah.
I just want to parenthesis my grandfather was in the same meetings, with nationalist meetings on the Buddha.
In where?
In Europe and in Africa,
Yeah.
in the continent.
Amazing. He helped found your country, Ghana?
Yeah, it was Nasser, Kwame Nkrumah, Tito. Those was the people that they had. They call themselves non-allies because they are not for Russians,
Right.
they are not for the Americans.
Interesting, yeah.
And in those groups, there was the leaders had that we want our own country.
Right.
out make colonialism,
Right.
out for exploitations.
Yeah.
One has some so-called communist.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But though that's the main structure that we many of us here is fruit of.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, the map of the world now is built up of many, many small countries, and everybody claimed their independence, and this is what the mitzvah is, that there should be Jewish independence. We should have our own country. So it connects in that way. Of course, we're doing it as a mitzvah.
Yeah.
It's not just we want to have national pride. According to the way we're reading the sources, this is part of the Torah. The Torah commands us to create a state and to settle the land under Jewish control. Okay, so now this was quite a battle in early Zionism. Let's read the next. Some rabbis were very supportive of this effort, so much so that they taught how Hashem will protect us. Look on page 153, the section from Rabbi Yaakov Reines, who was one of the early religious Zionist leaders. He wrote as follows: the settlements founded until now. Shmuel, maybe you read for us? Thank you.
So the settlements founded until now, with the help of God, will provide strength and inspiration for the coming days. Indeed, if we continue to gain ground in this enterprise, we shall doubtless prosper with the help of God, in accordance with the efforts invested. We may then trust that gradually the idea of settlement of in Eretz Israel will spread and will be embraced by the entire nation. Anyone following the rise of the Yishuv with open eyes will realize that it enjoys divine protection. How else could we have weathered all the storms and stresses and hostile machinations that more than once threatened the very survival of the Yishuv? Notwithstanding our enemies' numerical superiority and sustained thrusts against the Yishuv, the ideal of Jewish national resurrection has retained its pulsating vitality. Surely this is incontestable evidence of overt divine providence.
Okay, we wouldn't be able to make it if we didn't have divine help. Really, it was an upward battle. Still is till today. What did we just had a week long of over 1,000 rockets being shot at Israel, people's homes being destroyed, and one person was killed. One. When was it?
When?
Last week. It just stopped 2 days ago. Yeah. You're just. It was mostly in the south of the country. You didn't hear any sirens. There was some, but mostly it was in the south. But
the lady died.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And her husband seriously injured.
It's terrible. But so some people are still fighting for our settling of the land, but there's definitely evidence of divine providence, Hashem helping us out. What we celebrate tomorrow night is perhaps the cherry on top, the greatest example of the divine providence of how we saw such miracles, because we were totally outnumbered in 1967 when 7 Arab armies swore to push us into the sea, and in 6 days we managed to vanquish their armies and win the war. It was universally acclaimed as a miracle that we could overcome, and we celebrate to this day. There's so many elements of this divine protection, this miraculous survival, and there's so many elements. Of course, we talk about Jerusalem as the centerpiece of that victory. But a lot of people don't realize that really the people who lived in Israel, like we said, until today, were under attack. In those days, in 1967, and I heard this from people, I was born after 67, but people who were there told me that people really felt like this was the end. That the Jewish settlement in the land everybody was going to be slaughtered. That they were all going to be pushed into the sea. Because they were being attacked from all sides, the biggest armies in the world, and we weren't defenseless, but we were outnumbered, and we were not getting the help we needed from overseas, and people were actually terrified that they were going to all be killed, and that there will be no more Israel. This whole Zionist endeavor to create the state of Israel from 1948 until 1967 lasted for 19 years. That was also miraculous, but they thought that this is the end. We tried, and we're gonna all, if they all gathered together, somehow in 1948 the Arabs were not ready for the war. They weren't organized. You can make all sorts of explanations. I just heard a historian just published a new book how actually in 1948 the Jews were much more organized than the Arab armies because they didn't plan any attack. But in '67 they were ready. They were planned. They had well supplied, and they were going to destroy Israel. And the salvation, therefore, was so moving. It was like breathing. It's coming to life again. It's like being almost on the brink of death. And therefore, the celebrations last until today. It's not only about Jerusalem and the fact that we also reconquered the Judea and Samaria and the Golan Heights and the Sinai, and it was just there was just so many elements to it. But of course, the centerpiece that we focus on is Jerusalem. But we can't ignore the very fact of the settlement, the entire fact that all of the Zionism of trying to settle the land and creating a Jewish government, it was really all about to be lost in 1967, and that's what we're celebrating to commemorate that war, the 6-Day War. It's not only about Jerusalem and religiosity; it's literally being saved from death to life. From death to life, we were under the danger of death, and you could say when you go through the desert, you're in a dangerous situation. Go through the water, you're in a dangerous situation. When you're in jail, it's considered to be a dangerous situation. And when you're deathly ill, those are the four types. So we had all of those. We were in the desert. we came back. We were in jail. The danger to life, basically. The Jewish community in the land of Israel was in danger, and really, Baruch Hashem, we survived with the divine protection. So we're going to celebrate. We're going to continue talking more about this topic tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem. Tomorrow before the afternoon. In the afternoon, we're going to go off and actually have a tour of some of the sites where the war took place. It's going to be hard to imagine because it's all rebuilt now, Baruch Hashem. And then we're going to make our way towards the Kotel and celebrate there. And more celebrations on Friday morning as well with the Hallel with the Bracha. Friday morning, special davening, special Yom Tov davening. We'll be dressed in our finest, in our Yom Tov clothes by tomorrow afternoon already, getting ready for it.
What's Yom Tov clothes?
So in these parts, I mean, every society is a little different. Clothes for festive clothes, so most people here wear a white shirt. Because on weekdays we don't, and then on Shabbat we do, so it's special. So people wear a white shirt every day, so then you have to do something else to make it special. Meir Strimal, there you go. So bring your Strimals tomorrow night.
Blue and white.
Some people wear blue and white. It's sweet. That's a nice idea. I know the children in kindergarten are told to wear blue and white because it's the colors of the flag. But you don't have to wear blue and white. You can wear black pants or purple pants, whatever you like. Seder? We'll talk more about it tomorrow morning. Okay.